Good morning, everyone. My name's Lee Seal. I'm the chief of the Sacramento County Probation Department, and this is the December 3rd, 2020 meeting of the Community Corrections Partnership. I want to welcome those of you who are on the phone with us, those who, members of the public who will be speaking to us today. I look forward to today's item. At this point, I'll ask the clerk to call roll and establish a quorum.
Good morning. Bielenson, Acosta, Garrett, Gordon, Paletta, Nickel, Ramos, Grippy, Sullivan, Wagstaff, Walker, and Chief Seal.
Here, thank
To
you.
have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Would you please read the opening statement?
Yes. This meeting of the Sacramento County Community Corrections Partnership is being cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse. Today's meeting will replay on Sunday, December 6th at 9 a.m. on Channel 14. This meeting is simultaneously webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. A DVD copy of this meeting can be requested through the clerk 7 to 10 days after the meeting. In compliance with directives of the county, state, and Center for Disease Control and Prevention, this meeting is live streamed and closed to the public. Temporary procedures are subject to change pursuant to guidelines related to social distancing and minimizing person-to-person contact. To make a verbal comment at today's meeting, dial 916-875-2500 and follow the prompts to be placed in the queue for a specific agenda item or off-agenda matter. When the chair opens the public comment for a specific agenda item or off-agenda matter, callers will be transferred from the queue into the meeting to make a verbal comment. Written comments are always accepted. Send your email comment to boardclerk@saccounty.net. Your comment will be routed to the board and filed in the record. Also, as a friendly reminder, please remember to mute the meeting in the background. Remember to mute your phone when you're not speaking. Use the handset and not a speakerphone. And also, as a reminder, that there is a 30-second delay if you are watching the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are here today as part of a new requirement set forth in statutory trailer bill language that came out this summer to approve our CCP plan. We have to do this by a statutory mandate of December 15th. This board has to approve it by December 15th, after which it goes to the Board of Supervisors and would be considered likely as part of the budget process at some point later, either in the spring or in the summer. I will say at the outset that a lot of work has gone into this plan. We have long viewed this as a long-term plan that really set forth goals and objectives over the span of years, and it was never intended to be rewritten every year. That was never the goal of the CCP or our approach. But that said, we are cognizant of a need, and I think I speak on behalf of many of us when I say that in looking at this plan, there is enthusiasm to take up many aspects of it, and we will probably be looking at this plan on a more regular basis going forward, likely as part of an annual process. Our goal today is to see if we can reach agreement to approve this plan so that we can, again, meet the mandate of December 15th. But I want to make clear to all the members of the CCP and the public who we will hear from, that there will be ongoing opportunities even after today's vote. Even if we were to vote to approve this as hoped, there will be immediate action to begin working on the plan because there are next steps that we already are contemplating that we will vote on today. We may hear comments from the public that spur us to action or initiative in certain directions. And even regardless of all those things, we believe that this is something that we want to be prepared to update on a more annualized basis going forward. So this is something, this plan that I think what's presented in front of us is a great starting point, but I also think that there will be opportunities as we go forward to continue to work on it. So with that, let me turn it over to, is it now time to call the first agenda item? Okay, great. We'll do that, please.
Item number 1 is vote to approve recommended Community Corrections Partnership AB 109 plan update mandated by the Budget Act of 2020.
Thank you. I'll ask for the staff report.
Good morning, everyone. The staff report is a recommendation to approve the updated AB 109 plan. And because of the Budget Act mandate and the short notice we had, the amendments to the plan were minimal. As Chief Seal indicated, the initial plan, the long-term plan established, was very deliberate in that it had established funding decisions allocated each year through the county budget process and prioritized 8 specific areas. So those 8 specific areas are continued in this update. But as he said, we can continue, and in the recommendation, there's a recommendation to, in the staff report, there's a recommendation to reconvene the statistical working group, which is a subcommittee that was established during the development of the long-term AB 109 plan to meet ongoing data collection and evaluation needs for additional analysis and stakeholder input. And this group can be reconvened at the request of the CCP. And I would work with the CCP members to identify who from their agencies would be part of the statistical work group to continue reevaluating the plan and coming back to CCP with recommendations on any changes.
Okay, great. So that would be a recommendation that even if we were to vote in support and approval of this plan today, the recommendation from staff would be that we convene this statistical working group so as to incorporate data and outcomes into this plan as we go forward. And
as
that
well
would be
as further input from the community, yes.
And further input from the community. Thank you very much. Okay, great. Anything further?
No.
Okay, great. So at this time, I'd like to welcome input from other board CCP members. I'll defer to the clerk, but I believe so. Thank you. She's nodding.
Well, I just wanted to note your comments that you made leading into our discussion this morning. That I would agree with you that there's opportunities, and we should take those opportunities moving forward to get input on this plan. No plan should be such that there isn't an ongoing effort. I mean, they're living documents. They're living documents, and I appreciate your comments. And I think we need to make a commitment to follow through on your comments, to work to find ways to get ongoing input into this plan. Recognizing that we got a pretty short time frame to react to the budget trailer bill, that I don't think there was a lot of advance notice about. As I recall, it was a pretty last minute thing that they put this requirement in I'm not disputing the requirement. It's just that there wasn't much of a chance to react to it. So that's what we're doing today, but I appreciate your comments and how we ought to go forward.
Thank you, Bruce. Other comments from CCP members?
This is Steve Grippy. I don't have a lot to say. I guess I'll just make it real simple. I agree with what Bruce said just now, 100%.
Thank you.
Lee, this is Steve Garrett, Public Defenders. I think everyone agrees on all sides of this issue that it's essential that the county get this money from the state. I don't think there can be any doubt or dispute about the importance that those resources could provide to this county. There may be disputes and disagreements about where they should go, but the fact that the county needs the resources, I don't believe there would be any dispute. Second, it's my view that there's been some unexpected community interest, and that the process in which we've updated the plan really hasn't had a lot of input from the community, nor from the members of this board. And I'm requesting that we put a very short pause in a matter of days so that we can make adjustments to the plan if necessary. And it also allows the community to better understand what the meaning of a plan is. Because in some communities, at least that I've been able to determine, this board acts in different ways in terms of allocating of things and allocating of money than traditionally has happened in this county. And I think that before we vote on this, we should at least have people have an understanding of what that vote may mean, and as well for the members of this board to understand and have an understanding of what that may mean. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And I'll take the opportunity to reply specifically because your comments are very well taken. I think we all have to agree that we have not engaged the community in a way that is sufficient or to our satisfaction. In part, we can point to the fact that the statutory mandate came to us very quickly. In part, we can point to the pandemic, which makes engagement challenging right now, but it's not impossible. And neither one of those things are really excuses. So I'll say that is absolutely something that we need to do. I could not agree with you more. It should be a part of this process as we go forward. We need to figure out a way to do that. I'm sure we will hear from members of the public. I know we've already received, all the members of the board have received comments already from the public that most of which express that as well. So that is something that we need to do going forward. I think the question will be just a timing issue of what is the best way to achieve what we're seeking to do today, but nonetheless engage the public as we go forward. So with that, let me turn it back over to fellow CCP members. Any other comments from the CCP?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Cindy Nicol. I just wanted to say, as interim CFO, I'm looking forward to getting this input from the community as well as the statistical working group. And it's really excellent timing as we start to prepare for the fiscal year 22 budget. So I'm pleased to be able to participate at this point, and I don't know if I'll still be in the seat for months to come. We'll see, but I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, and we welcome and appreciate your participation in this. Other comments from CCP members?
This is William Walker. I wanted to agree with Steve's comments. I know we just got this plan maybe day before yesterday. So in looking at it, it's kind of difficult to approve something after a 2-day turnaround of a 60-page document. So I just wanted to make that comment.
We recognize that and agree. Other comments from the board? Okay, would now be an appropriate, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, this is Bruce again. I just, to William's comments, I appreciate that. I wanted, for my own understanding, and going back to the staff report, what we're looking at here today, as I reviewed it, was the plan that we've had with some amendment that we've had a chance to review before, with some amendments that we had to make given the new statutory language. Isn't that correct, Lee?
Yes.
I do appreciate what William is saying. I just wanted just to reiterate that.
Yeah, that's correct. We are operating under statewide statutory requirements that came to us relatively late in the process. So we certainly would have preferred to do this in a way that allowed us more time and more community input. We and 57 other counties out there are rushing to meet the mandates. I think what I will likely propose at the end of public comment is just to remind us that we have the option of approving a plan today and immediately, and I mean immediately, engaging with the public and immediately begin a process of even amending the plan. Our approval today does not preclude us from changing this plan in the coming months. For example, we will talk, I'm sure at some point in our meeting today, about our future CCP schedule, but I know in the coming early part of 2021, we have a meeting on the calendar, and we easily could ask that staff today take steps to facilitating community engagement with an eye towards amending this plan, and all of that could occur even if we amend our plan today in compliance with the statutory requirements. So I think there's a possibility of us achieving all those things we want to achieve. I think there's likely, I'm hearing consensus, or at least a majority of those of us on the board agreeing that we want to do more to engage the public. There's probably more that we would like to see in this report, but we can still do those things, and I'm looking at council and staff right now to confirm we still can achieve those goals even if we approve this plan today. That's correct.
And Chair, if I might, this is Bruce again. Would it not be possible, I'm anxious to hear public comment on this, and would it not be possible to approve it with the proviso, formally approve it with the proviso that that process occur?
I'll turn to County Council and ask that question.
Yes, you could approve the plan today as is with the proviso or understanding, direction to staff that a meeting be set for the consideration of amendments at a future date in 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from board members? I should say CCP members. Okay, let's go to public comment.
Okay, and I believe we have 2 callers in the queue. So
you.
go ahead and send the first caller down.
Good morning.
Yeah, it takes them a second to, yeah.
Good morning. Do we have someone on the phone? You have 2 minutes for public comments. We can't hear you, so if you're making well-informed points,
The phone is busy.
you may be on mute.
How do I? phone will ring. Good morning, caller. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead and start with your comment.
Hi, PJ here. My understanding is that there has been a community member position vacancy in this group for over 6 years. How exactly is this reaching its goal of helping reentry and recidivism rates through a partnership with the community if you don't have adequate representation? It seems that rather than funding potential non-carceral, non-law enforcement options, this has just become another pot of money for the sheriff. This board needs to represent the community. I would ask that it add at least 2 community-selected members to the current executive CCP board. I would also ask that at least half of the funds from AB 109 be given to community organizations that provide restorative, non-punitive, and trauma-informed reentry and care services, which serve to keep people out of jail. I'd like to hope that that is an actual goal here. Former and current incarcerated individuals need to have a seat at the table. There is nothing like serving a population and not actually having information from that portion of the community telling you what they need to succeed. They need to be centered in every decision on funding that is made. And lastly, the funds need to be used primarily to reduce the Sacramento County jail population, not to fund more law enforcement to increase those numbers, but actually have a goal of rehabilitation and making a genuine effort to help that succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
Okay, go ahead and send the next caller, please. Hello, caller. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead with your comments.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Good morning. This is Liz Blum. I'm with the Decarcerate Sacramento. I just want to make a few comments. First, just from what I heard from what Bruce just said about approving today, seems like most of the committee is leaning towards, not approving today, and the community has barely had any time to review this report, so I would just urge you not to do that. I also want to say that finding the information for this meeting was extremely difficult as someone who navigates the county system quite a bit, and this meeting was not listed on the CCP website directly, just the previous meetings that have since been canceled. So I just want to respectfully say that your excuses for lack of community engagement are, you could have implemented community engagement before this new bill was passed, and you made that choice not to. Community seat has actually been vacant since 2014, and so I just have a question as to why that is. If you're so concerned about community engagement, why has that seat been vacant for so long? And yeah, there currently even seems to be no publicly available breakdown of how you plan to spend this money, which I understand is sort of allocated throughout the year to various projects. And you mentioned in some of the agenda attachments that you're getting input from formerly incarcerated individuals, and I just have a question as to how and what type of input. And obviously, we agree that currently and formerly incarcerated individuals need to be at the center of these decisions, since they're the ones who have experienced these systems and know it best. And so I'm just have a lot of questions there. I also just want to say that this plan as is will continue to fail our communities in Sacramento County. I want to stress that e-carceration ankle monitors are just a different form of incarceration, and they're not alternatives to incarceration. The Sheriff's Department and the Probation Department should not be at the forefront of this plan. Just reminder, there are other departments on this board, the Department of Health, the Public Defender's Office, and I just don't see them really in this plan at all. So your solutions obviously should be based not in punishment, but in accountability and trauma-informed care. And also just last question about your statistical working group, which is planning to ask all of the wrong questions, which is why community needs to be on this board. You're planning to ask is flash incarceration leading to behavioral change. And when I read that as someone who, sorry, as a sister who, my brother's been incarcerated so many times, oh my God. This is why you need community members on this board, because you're asking questions that are in and of themselves wrong. They're not going to give you the right answers. They're traumatizing even to read. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any further public comment?
Yes, go ahead and send the next caller, please. Hello, caller. Go ahead with your comment.
need community members on this board, because you're asking questions that are...
Yeah, can you please mute the meeting in the background?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead with your comment.
All right, thank you. Oh, can I start now?
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is T. Pansupa. I am very concerned about what's happening right now. I just, from the comments I've heard earlier, I'm glad I am able to speak and have my input currently. And I really hope we don't put anything through or rush right now, because I mean, with the stuff going with NABGIL and so many things that's been happening that isn't being transparent and isn't allowing the community to put effort into making a better environment and better Sacramento for us after these things have been passed. It's kind of ridiculous how much this is happening, and the more community gets involved, the more we realize that this isn't really accessible for us. So I just want to acknowledge that, and I hope there is better outreach and services or ways of community engagement to help really improve these projects. It's really just lip service to say all these things and then have it come to this county level and have the county implement it without having any input from people who have been incarcerated or family members who have to experience the amount of state violence that they're going through because of systemic racism. There's Black and brown communities who are suffering not because they've done anything wrong, because of racism. We should not be using any models that involve the sheriff's department and, like Liz said, with any impunitive punishments, because it has not worked. And if we want to reduce people going to jails and getting put back or even on probation, that's entrapment. Like, sheriff's programs are entrapment. A lot of these programs don't see people who have quote-unquote done crime, who are accused or alleged of having done crime. They're really dehumanized before they're even convicted. And if they're convicted, they're completely dehumanized. I just want to say that we cannot have any punitive measurements, and it is pretty much entrapment, because, what we've seen is a lot of Black and brown communities often get into the system and get fed into the system and keep going back into the system because of these little records that get put into their names, and then all of a sudden they're there for life, they're there for 30 years. And then
Thank you, caller. Can
stuff
we
that
get
their
your
family
final
has to go
comments,
through.
please?
So it really impacts more than the person, but their family and their communities. And so we really do need folks who have been affected and the communities have been affected to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you.
And I really implore y'all to really think about how y'all structure yourself to really get the community involved. So, because this is just egregious, and this is really, and I hope we can really do better on many different levels of the department and the county. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you, caller. Go ahead and send the next call. Hello, caller. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead and start with your comments. Caller, are you there?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I can
go
hear you
ahead
now.
and start with your comments.
Yeah, I'm calling in today, honestly, to point out that Sacramento County seems to have this consistent problem with being transparent and accountable to the community it claims to serve. And it's really evident that when you're talking about how we can approve this partnership or whatnot, or this funding, this plan, without any community input, but we can amend it after the fact, as if there's any precedent or counting where you actually do that. Because as it shows, where it comes to if the CRF process is any indicator, you have no intention whatsoever of actually doing proactive outreach to the community, much less do you have the community's well-being and best interest in mind. It seems to me as though the probations department and the sheriff's department really only have any intention of just getting as much money as it possibly can to continue doing the status quo that it has been doing for years, with absolutely tragic and horrific results to the community as a whole, particularly for people that have been incarcerated within Sacramento County's jail system. So at bare minimum, it is important that this community corrections partnership provide at least 50% of the AB 109 funds directly to community organizations that actually provide restorative, non-punitive, and trauma-informed reentry and care services that keep people out of jail. It's imperative, and we demand that formerly and currently incarcerated individuals not only have a seat at the table, but are centered in every AB 109 funding decision going forward. And with at least 2 community selected members onto the current executive CCP team. AB 109 funds should be used for the primary purposes of reducing Sacramento County jail populations, no less than that. And the probation department itself should provide community with detailed data on the outcomes of their SB 10 pretrial pilot program. You didn't get to this point of having to decide this at the last minute because, you are just scrambling about trying to do your best. I think it's really just about maintaining your own personal status on power and being comfortable with that status. And I think it's bullshit that you continue to spout platitudes of wanting to do community engagement without actually showing that in action. I'm going to tell this to Theo, I'm going to tell this to Bruce, I'm going to tell this to every single CCP member, as well as Sacramento County officials. Stop talking about wanting to do right by the community. Stop talking about wanting to get community engagement and actually do it. Put up or shut up. Pass.
Go ahead and send the next caller, please. Hello, caller. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead and start with your comment.
Good morning. My name is Judy Hyman, and I would like to support the prior comments in their calls for ensuring that these funds are used primarily for the purposes of reducing the Sacramento County jail populations. For example, devoting at least half of the funds to community organizations providing restorative, non-punitive, trauma-informed reentry care and services that keep people out of jail, as some other counties have done, ensuring that formerly and currently incarcerated individuals have a seat at the table and are centered in these discussions, and providing transparency about how these funds are being spent and also about how the SB 10 pretrial pilot is proceeding and its outcomes. And I'd like to add to those comments that after acknowledging the lack of public input in this plan, I think it would really be a slap in the face to the community to approve the plan today, regardless of any wording you add saying that it's subject to being amended later. I urge you to reconsider approving it today. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead and send the last caller, please. Hello, caller. Go ahead and start with your comments. You have 2 minutes. Hello?
Hello?
Hi, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead and start with your comments.
Okay, my name is Dan Adderall. I'm founder and leader of American River Homes Crew, and I support AB 109 but, in a way, but I think it should be going 50% towards our community organizations, not just the Sheriff's Department, and which will help our community grow instead of keeping our community weak. We need to grow better, and that's why I'm calling about the fight for that, because we need our community to grow instead of being stuck behind in all the funding going towards the sheriffs. I think it'd be more beneficial if half of it, at least, goes to our community organizations that are out there helping our people of our community. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead and send the last call, please. Hello, caller. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead and start with your comment.
Hi, good morning. I just want to stress that public comment is not the same as purposeful, meaningful community engagement, and the development of solutions and recommendations without meaningful engagement with people who will be most impacted by this will lead to failing the public you're serving on this committee, and that's evidenced by some of the programs that have been listed in these recommendations that you're discussing today. I also want to emphasize that this money really should be used to reducing the jail population. And finally, I want to point out that a lot of the ways in which you're analyzing how these programs are working or not working have an impoverished analysis. They fail to really capture the human experiences behind some of the numbers that you list in these programs. And I want to emphasize again that engaging with the community in a meaningful way is a long-term, difficult process that needs to extend beyond public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead and send the next caller. Oh, there's no more calls.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to go back to CCP members for further discussion. I know we've heard from several already. There may be some additional thoughts that we have in response to what we've heard from public input. I will say also that we are in receipt of emailed copies of public input as well, and I can tell you that I read through everything that I had received as of this morning from the public as well, so that input is being considered. I will begin by agreeing with one of the sentiments. I agree with much of what has been said, but I certainly agree with one point off the bat, which is we need to immediately take steps to fill our vacant position on the CCP, which is, I believe, allocated to a community member. So unless that requires a separate vote, I'd just like to simply ask staff to take whatever steps are needed to do that so that we can either be informed by our next meeting or preferably have a process initiated that we can get someone in place and joining us here on the CCP. Any direction on that from council?
Yes, staff can take that request back and get the process started. That's not something we can vote on here today, of course, because it's not on the agenda, but that is something staff can work on getting in future agendas and before the Board of Supervisors for nomination.
Great, thank you very much. Other CCP member input?
Lee, this is Steve Garrett. I want to acknowledge the difficult place you're in and the great job that you generally do and the Herculean efforts you're doing here. On behalf of the county and your view of what's best. I have 3 points I want to make. One, the issue of systemic racism or racism as a public health crisis has recently been acknowledged by the Board of Supervisors There's also a new law going into effect in January, Penal Code 745. When I search our document, I don't see reference to those kinds of things. Secondly, I do think that there is an issue with public comment not being the same as public input, and I found particularly persuasive in terms of whether I want to vote to push forward today or not was Ray Lozada, who's a very respected and beloved recently retired probation officer who I personally know, who was generally in support of let's do something different. I don't want to characterize it, it speaks for itself, but I was startled to read that this morning from Ray. And my third point is, I think we don't know what it means to say we're approving it. If we vote yes now, what does that mean? And I think that the document should say that. It says if it means that there will later on be decisions where the money goes, or if it means the money will be allocated as it always has been, unless the Board of Supervisors does something different, or if it means that the county executive's office will decide it. I think the public needs to know, and as representatives on the board voting, we need to know what is that? What is the effect of it? And the document should say. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Other comments from CCP members?
Lee, this is Bruce again. Is there the possibility of us getting an extension on this time frame, given the comments we've heard?
I do not believe so.
Maybe that's a question for council, I guess, maybe.
The time frame is set in statute, and I do not anticipate that there's any way that that statute could be changed given where we are in the state legislative cycle, even if it could be changed, whether we'd be successful in doing so. And so I'm fairly confident that the answer to that is no. Now, we could choose to not meet that deadline. The consequence of that would be the loss of $200,000 to the county, which is obviously not insignificant. So our goal right now is to seek approval so that we not forfeit that planning money that is so essential to the work we're doing. But again, I stress, and I'm committed to this, and I say this even with some of the skepticism that you've heard from community members who have not been brought to the table. We can vote to approve this with the knowledge that work continues the very second after it's approved, that work continues on this plan, that we could, that we will seek, for example, greater community engagement, and we could even give specific direction to staff to include certain amendments, if we so desire, in this report. But nothing about our vote today precludes community engagement. And as I said, we do have, I believe, a meeting on the calendar in the coming months, in the early part of 2021, that would allow us to both have achieved at least some level of community engagement, the beginning of community engagement, and to incorporate whatever we wish from that community engagement into an amended plan that we could vote on and approve in April. So again, I want to stress that our vote today is the beginning of a process. It would not mean the conclusion of the process, and it would by no means, for me, symbolize that we're done with this plan. It merely gets the process started and opens the door for us to continue to do some of the things that we have expressed, and other CCP members and several callers have expressed that we do. But I do not believe that we would have any success in changing a statutory deadline. Other comments from CCP members?
Leah, a question for council, I think. What would it take for us to appoint the community members as quickly as possible? What would it take? Can we do that? Can we take some action today formally to make that happen?
I think, well, I don't want to step in front of council. We'll hear from him, but I think what we've heard is already direction to staff and council to begin with as much speed as possible to prepare ourselves so that we can get someone in place as quickly as possible. Beyond that, I defer to council as to the steps that are actually required.
That's
well,
correct.
I would just want somebody to be in that slot so that they could be actively involved in whatever effort you're suggesting, Lee. That's all I'm wondering about.
That point's very well taken. I agree with it. Is there a way to achieve that?
Yeah, I think that you already have by directing staff to expedite that process. But unfortunately, because it's not on the agenda, there's really not any ability to discuss that further here today, and certainly to take any action. But
thank you.
It can go back to staff to get it to the Board of Supervisors for a nomination and an appointment on to fill that seat.
And so if, for example, we have a meeting in April of 2021, it is possible that we could have a community member in place for that meeting. Is that within the realm of possibility?
Absolutely. I think that could happen sooner than April.
Would we have to have a vote of the CCP to add the member? Because we could do a special meeting if you would like to do a special meeting for a vote to add the community member. But I'm not sure. I'd have to defer to council.
This is Steve Grippy. I think we should do that if necessary. That was my concern. If we have to wait for our next meeting to approve somebody, they may miss out on a lot of opportunity to provide input. And if we need a meeting, let's set one, a special one. I know there's work to be done behind the scenes right now to figure out how to get this happening, and I recognize that, but I just agree that we should get this person on board. At least that's one thing we can show to the public, for whatever it's worth to them, that we mean what we're saying, because I do.
Thank you, Steve.
I agree with you, Steve. And the fact, I'm not sure, one of the callers said that slot's been vacant for 6 years. And that's very concerning, if that's the case. So we need to get that spot filled as fast as we can, however we need to do, however it works to do that, seems to me. And so that the person is not just starting on the April date, but has had a chance to be engaged leading up to that point.
Okay, so let me capture, I think, the consensus of the CCP, which is we want to have that community member slot filled as quickly as possible. We will ask staff working with council to research how we can achieve that goal of getting that spot filled as quickly as possible. Of course, we want to do it in a meaningful way that's not superficial. I'm sure the public wants an opportunity, to ensure that there's a thoughtful process. But we'll ask staff to do that with the goal of thereby including that person in this process as early as possible in 2021, including, to Mr. Grippy's comment, the possibility of scheduling a special meeting of the CCP to approve that person's place on the CCP, so it can be that formal engagement with this plan can continue. And again, I'll stress it one more time, that engagement and further amendment of this plan can continue to occur in 2021 all the way up to the Board of Supervisors budget process or whatever point it is that they accept this plan or vote on this plan. Are there any further comments as to that or any other aspect of item 1? Okay. At this point, I would seek a motion to approve the plan with the specific direction that we will do two things. Number one, as I just stated, we will move with diligence and speed to get someone appointed into our vacant position on the CCP. And number two, we will commence a process for community engagement on this plan. And I know that many of us who are members of the CCP, we have met with various members of the community, including, I think, some of the groups who have been represented in public comment and perhaps on the phone this morning as well. And I know that I can be assured that there's a commitment from us that we will follow through on that commitment. So with those two things, that we will appoint a member to fill the vacant spot, and we will commence with real and meaningful community engagement on this plan, including amendments to the plan. Even after we approve it today, it still can be further amended in coming months. That we take a vote to approve the plan today. Is there any discussion on that motion?
One thought, Mr. Chair, is it possible to, as part of your suggestion, one of the concerns that folks made in the calls was that they had a hard time accessing the materials and stuff. I just would want to make sure that whatever plan we have to get input is well advertised, and people know about it, and we really make a conscious effort to do the outreach necessary to get that input. I wouldn't want folks to find out that it occurred after the fact. So some way of really making sure that it's widely known and that there is a wide opportunity for input. Not sure if that makes any sense. But
that makes perfect sense. I think that's very well taken, and we will make sure to publicize our effort at community engagement as best we can. And I know that many of us on this, as part of the CCP, are in direct engagement. I know that I may have a meeting in the next 2 weeks with some of the folks who have called in today. So we will make sure that we directly engage with those folks and make sure that it's publicly available to others as well, so that there can be meaningful notice and participation.
Chief Seal, you could even have a special workshop set up in January, February, if you'd like to put on a workshop for the AB 109 plan development updates.
Thank you. Can I ask you to research that, and we'll consider it among the many options in front of us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. With those things in mind, do we have a motion?
I motion to approve.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, do we have a second?
Lee, I was going to answer that, Steve Garrett.
Yeah, please.
I think we've not had, I would like to hear from council, I think. We've talked a lot about a special meeting, and we have 12 days before the deadline. Obviously, everyone understands I'm in favor of including something about what the community is saying in the document and making clear what it means for us to approve this plan. And right now, it's not clear what we're saying if we approve it. So that's where I am. So I would like us to do that, and I don't know if that's possible for us to have a special meeting as of early next week, and make a few changes in order to include what some of the concerns are. And I think because the document is a guide to where we may go in the future, and I think it's important that we at least include some of those issues. And then hopefully we can get it to the board for a quick resolution or maybe a consent item. I'm not sure. I would have to rely upon Mr. Heyer on what we can do legally to get the approval we need.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Let me pose the question for council. The question is, do we have time between now and December 15th to meaningfully engage the public and come together to approve this plan?
Well, let me start by saying what I think a vote to approve this means is you meet the statutory and rather technical requirement to show the state that we have a plan. It does not mean that the plan is set in stone. It means that you've met the technical requirement to procure those funds. But the ability to change the plan, amend the plan, fine-tune the plan exists all the way up through the budget process for the county, which of course does not take place until it's concluded in September, but really the meat of it is done in May and June of next year. Could it be...
So Rick, just a question, if I may. I want to make sure I understand this. So whatever we do, it wouldn't really be effectuated until the board took the budgetary action next year?
Well, I think that, Bruce, that's yes, correct. But I want to be clear that if we, the county, don't approve some plan by the 15th, that money is not available. So there is a requirement to get this action to approve a plan done by the 15th. So to Mr. Garrett's other question about is it possible to have another meeting and consider more input from the community, consider other things, I suppose it is in theory possible, but it comes up with a very hard deadline of the 15th, and then getting a meeting set, and then we would, I can't answer the practicalities of all that. But from a legal standpoint, is it possible? Yes. Is it practically possible? I don't know.
Is it possible to comply with the Brown Act?
Mr. Chair, may I ask another question? I don't mean to just be barging in here. But to council, given the concerns we've heard from the public and Mr. Garrett's question, could we not actually include in this plan language that it's being adopted to meet the statutory time frame, but in the plan, make the commitment to, seek this public input and have a comprehensive public input effort, and then for reconsideration. But to be right in the plan, be clear, because Steve's point was it's not clear what we're voting on. Be very clear that we're doing this to meet the statutory deadline so that we don't lose that funding that Lee made reference to, but that we're committing to that upcoming action.
I think that is a terrific idea, Bruce, that we actually vote to approve the plan today with an explicit amendment that is written into the plan itself, that there will be community engagement as we've described, and I'll say that it has to occur in a meaningful time frame, meaning at some point before summer budget negotiations, so that this plan can be received by the board with that input. But we could put it in the plan that part of our plan is that we are going to engage with the community in the way that Steve Garrett has described and Steve Grippy and Bruce Wagstaff, and I think we all agree with. And that becomes part of our plan. And that community engagement itself can further amend the plan so that it is, in the words of council, a living, breathing plan that can be further changed and approved at a subsequent CCP meeting. So in other words, we can both meet our December 15th statutory guideline and not forfeit critical money, but still have a amendment written into the plan that it is part of our plan now to engage the public and incorporate public input into the plan. Bruce, did I capture that well?
Yeah, with one possible exception, Lee, I would want that all to happen. I think you said the summer.
Before the summer.
Well, the board votes on the budget in June. So I'd want to see it happen in line with that, so that when the actual funding decisions are made, that public effort has been completed.
Good point. I'll ask staff to remind us of our next scheduled CCP date, setting aside whether or not we set a special meeting to appoint a community member, but the current scheduled calendar.
April 1st.
April 1st, and we will in this meeting vote on that calendar. Is that right, to approve that?
Actually, it's part of the bylaws,
okay.
So it's already set.
So it's already set. So Bruce, would it get to your point if we vote today to have completed at least an initial round of community input, engagement, and taken those amendments in time so that it can be part of a revised and amended plan by our April 1st CCP meeting? I think that is a very good and fair timeline. For my part, I don't think it would we can meaningfully engage the public in the next 14 days going into the holiday season. But that would give us time to actually notice the public, include people, give people fair notice, ensure that people are aware, and actually have meaningful dialogue, and give us time to do all those things, wrap it up into a plan, and potentially vote on an amended plan at that April 1st CCP meeting. Input on that idea.
Lee, this is Steve Garrett. I hate to be the person who's monopolizing time, but I get what Bruce is trying to do. I think that those are really good points. I'm going to suggest I have a motion that we add this language to the plan before the vote. Then the language would be this, essentially. This plan is an update to what we have done in Sacramento County to comply with the Budget Act of 2020. The plan envisions more public input and further development and possible modification of the plan in the next, I put 3 months, but I'm not sure what time period we want to put. And this is the language that's important to me next. Approval of the plan neither contemplates nor mandates any particular allocation of the resources.
Thank you, Steve.
I think that's the issue with people right now. They want, and that's my concern, is what are we saying about the allocation of resources, and when they call me on the phone and say, what did you vote for? Are you voting for the allocation? I don't know the answer.
Okay, let me take your points in order, because you raised two very important points. Your encapsulation or your description of specific language, I think, is very helpful, and I think that is capturing the direction that we want to go. The only suggestion I would have is that we give ourselves until the April 1 CCP meeting, since it's on the calendar. We can always do more before then, but that gives us enough time to get back after the new year, get multiple meetings. This doesn't have to be a one and done. It could be multiple meetings. It could be engagement. I don't want to be prescriptive as to how it could occur, but I think, all of us have ideas about how we can do this. It gives us time to do it right, do it well, and then incorporate that input. Don't forget that the CCP members, one of our complaints that all of us have, I think even staff, is that we've had to work and review this under an extraordinarily unrealistic time frame. So we want to have time for the CCP to actually meaningfully receive these comments. So I would say that we set that April 1 board date as our CCP date as our deadline for inclusion. We can always do more before then, but at least that gives us a time to come back together and hopefully at that point approve an amended CCP plan. So that's to your first point. To your second point, the funding, I do want to clarify, because this is a point that's been stated before in past years, but it's important for the community to be aware that this CCP does not make funding or budget or monetary allocation decisions. This CCP makes priorities known to the board in our report, and that's what that report does. And then it's received by the board, and the ultimate decision as to funding and allocations and budget decisions, that's part of the countywide board budget process. Okay, so we are not making today or at any point specific funding decisions. What our purpose as a CCP is to describe a plan as we think it should be in the County of Sacramento, involving all of us working together and our agencies and the community, and a direction. But the actual budget decision is not part of our plan, and it will not be a part of our plan, and it never has, or it has not been a part of our plan for as long as I've been aware. That funding decision is part of the budget process, and those decisions are made by the Board of Supervisors. Other comments or input?
Well, I would just change Steve's approach a little bit. I think, Steve, you said the plan envisions a public comment process. I would say it commits to it. I'd like that language to be as strong as possible. And so I just thought that would be stronger. And to Lee's point about how the funding works, I guess that's in line with what Steve was suggesting, I think, isn't it, Mr. Chair?
Yes. Yes, I wanted to agree with that point and clarify that for the public as well.
So could I ask Mr. Garrett to reread his proposal again? With the word commit instead of envisions?
Steve?
He's probably writing it.
I've got it written here, Bruce. I hopefully I've made the changes, but I'll read it, and you obviously will probably make changes. So my motion is that we add this language to the document.
Mm-hmm.
This plan is an update to what we have done in Sacramento County to comply with the Budget Act of 2020. This plan commits to public input and further development and possible modification of the plan in the, on or before April 1st. Is that what you want, Lee?
Yes, please.
Okay, let me just write that down here, on or before. Approval of this plan neither contemplates nor mandates any particular allocation of resources.
Thank you, Steve.
So is that a motion, Steve?
That is a motion. However, I'm more than comfortable with making a motion that has modification of that language that improves it. I've just written it.
I would propose. Now, first of all, you have a motion on the floor, Lee, already. So
yeah. Help me, Council.
But
Bruce, one moment.
We might need a separate motion or an amendment to that motion to commit to an appointment of a community member to this group, to this committee, within the month, by the end of this month.
Okay,
I entertain a friendly amendment to my motion, Mr. Wagstaff.
Okay, let me interject and make sure that this is clear and clean with council. I had, there was a previous motion on the table, but I think that there is agreement to consider Steve's amended motion. What, if any, steps do I need to take to clean this up?
So as I understand it, you had a motion, I forget who made it, but you had a motion to approve the plan. Now there's a second motion to approve the plan with the language that Mr. Garrett suggested. Either the first motion could be withdrawn, or you need to ask if there's a second to either one of those motions. If one or both of them has a second, then you need to vote on them.
Okay.
But I want to be clear about one thing before we go too far down this road. I did a quick bit of research on the issue of appointment. The bylaws are silent as to that issue. It just basically reiterates what's in the code. Then I went and looked at the code section itself. I think that the CCP is not the body that appoints to this commission. It's the Board of Supervisors. So you could ask the Board of Supervisors, but I don't think this body could itself take the action to appoint to the vacant position.
So, council, does this body make a nomination to the board then?
That's unclear. I think you certainly could make a recommendation, which would probably look, for all intents and purposes, like a nomination, but it's not spelled out in the bylaws or in statute.
Bruce, what I would suggest, and other members of the CCP, is that we have already given direction to staff to commence this process as quickly as possible, but without sacrificing a meaningful process.
Right.
And I understand can continue and will continue regardless of any motion. So I think that is on one track, and it's going exactly the direction that this CCP wants to go. That, just to remind ourselves, that could involve the calling of a special CCP meeting if that's...
I think we should. Actually, I think we should have a special meeting.
But that will be something that staff will research and we'll find out. And if that's what we do, we've heard from Bruce, we've heard from Steve Grippy that there is interest in doing this as quickly as possible. And I join that, and I assume Mr. Garrett and others join that as well, that we want to do this as soon as possible, including contemplating a special meeting to appoint that person if necessary. But what I'm hearing from council is that it might be technically a board appointment, and if we have to go through a normal board process, then I just want to give enough space to staff to come up with the right and proper way to do this, however that might be. So it may not involve a CCP meeting, it might involve a board process. We just don't know. I think we would be well served to ask staff. She's getting the clear direction that we want to move quickly on this, and we will find out the right way to do this as quickly as possible, and involving, as necessary, any board approval and or CCP approval. Does that sound reasonable to everyone on the board? And I think
Steve, Lee, I'm just looking for language that commits to a time frame for that, so that, a board process can take a while. I said in a month, maybe that's unreasonable. They only have 2 meetings in December. But I do want to get this done, as you said, quickly. And I'd like some sort of formal action by this group to ensure that we're making the statement that it be done quickly. And so, if it can't be done in December, maybe their first meeting in January or something.
This is Steve Garrett again. I just have a question for council. Council, is it appropriate for the committee to make a recommendation to the board? They ultimately make the decision, of course.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is the question that can this body make a recommendation to who should fill the vacant position?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, the reason I ask is we could commit to make a recommendation within X period of time here, and that's really all we have the power to do.
Okay.
I agree, and I think what I've heard from council is, because this is not an agendized item, this would not be the subject of a motion, but this would simply be direction to staff and
I don't think in this meeting today you can suggest who that person is, take in consideration of making a recommendation. However, you could say, as an amendment to the plan, that we shall make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to fill this vacancy by X date. You could do that as an amendment to the plan.
And would it be something that would go into the plan itself?
much like if it were approved, much like the language that Mr. Garrett has suggested, if that's the amendment to the plan, it would be language that was, for instance, let me make it more concrete. If this body were to take Mr. Garrett's language and add to it or different language, but say, this body commits to having a workshop for community involvement and the consideration of appointment to the body to fill vacant seats by X date. That could be part of the plan.
Okay. I'm open to input from the CCP. I believe that we have expressed very clearly to staff that we want to get this position filled as quickly as possible. I think that my only hesitation here is that it is not clear as I sit here exactly what that process involves. I think we have some clarity based on council's quick reading of the statute that we would want to have some input from the CCP. It appears as if it needs to be approved by the board. But I think we all could agree that we want to have some kind of public process or some kind of engagement in the community so that we're not acting in isolation. So to do all those things right and do them well is the reason why I would suggest we give staff a time frame of, let's say, a couple of months. But I would suggest that we have to keep it flexible because we simply don't know exactly if this has to be an agendized board action, for example, that itself takes 1 month. So I don't know the right way to, or whether to be more specific or concrete in terms of timeframes than that. I hear from the board, and I think all of us agree that we'd be willing to convene a special meeting of the CCP if necessary. And I think that will be one of the things that she researches. And if we come back in January and have a process in place for approval by the CCP and come up with a name, then it could go on to the board, and hypothetically February or March, we could have a person appointed, and then there's time for that person to actually be on the board and consider the amendments that we intend to take by April. But as much as we're all enthusiastic to get this done quickly, what I'm hearing is that it will involve a process, and I don't want to set ourselves up for failure in terms of, how, if just in case there are multiple steps in that process with a CCP meeting and a board approval process, I just want to be sure that we have enough time to do this in the right way. So with that, I'm open to suggestions or a motion.
This is Steve Grippy again. I think what you just said, Lee, is the way to go. I also worry that if you set an unrealistic timeline, you end up with one person, which theoretically one person and others were not aware of the opportunity to. I don't know if they're going to apply or how this is going to work, but right. I'd like to have a little more open nature to this. Otherwise, we're just setting ourselves up for a failure.
I agree. Other input on that point?
This is Kelly Sullivan. I agree with both the chair and Mr. Grippy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly.
I think what Steve's saying is in our rush to fix this problem, we could make it even worse if we didn't do it right. But by not giving a full opportunity for people to apply. So I get that.
Yeah. So I think we've made ourselves loud and clear, our intentions well known, that we want to move as quickly as possible, but we recognize that there is a process. That process may involve a specially adjourned CCP meeting early in the new year. It could also include a board approval process. So with those things in mind, we want to make sure that we can do this in a meaningful way with public participation. And my understanding is that staff can take that direction that I believe captures the the direction of this CCP, and she can begin on that process without the necessity of a vote today. So are CCP members comfortable with her proceeding along the lines that I just described without the necessity of a specific vote or motion? Any contrary perspective? Okay, hearing none, we will be satisfied that that process is in place. Now let's please return to Steve Garrett's motion, and let's consider that as the motion we have on the floor and the prior motion withdrawn. Steve has proposed specific language that he has read, and it includes an April 1, 2020 date. I'm sorry, 2021, thank you. And it also includes specific language about the fact that this plan does not involve budget allocations. So returning to that motion, is there any further discussion on that, and or do we have a second?
I'm prepared to second it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm sorry, do I need? Okay. At this time, we'll call for a vote. Steve Garrett.
Well, I'm sorry to be technical. There was the motion before Mr. Garrett's motion to approve the plan as is. Was that withdrawn?
Yeah, that's withdrawn.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we're voting on Steve Garrett's motion to approve the plan with the specific language that will be written into the plan, mandating community engagement, making clear that we will that will occur no later than April 1, 2021, and a specific reference to the budget process as well. And we have a second on that plan. Okay, clerk, can we
Yes.
call
So
for
I'll
a
be
vote?
doing a roll call vote, and this will be, the voting members are just the executive committee.
Okay.
Steve Garrett,
Aye.
Dave Paletta,
Aye.
Santos Ramos,
Aye.
Steve Grippy,
Aye.
Kelly Sullivan,
Aye.
Bruce Wagstaff,
Aye.
and Chief Seal.
Aye.
And motion carries.
Thank you all very much, and I'll say that your input as CCP members responsive to community concerns and the input we've received, I think really helps go a long way towards addressing those concerns. Now, as we've heard from the community, we now have to act, and we can't just say those words and then not follow through. So I know that I speak for all of us when I say we're committed to fulfilling those actions that we've just set forth. With that, we will now go to our second agenda item.
Item number 2 is the 2021 CCP meeting calendar. It's just an informational item.
Included in the materials is the agenda for 2021. It includes the date of April 1st, 2021, and October 7th, 2021. As previously noted, you can call special meetings at any time.
Okay. So this is an informational item. Does that mean that we do not need a vote?
It is not required. My understanding is because it's written into the bylaws, it's established each year.
Okay. So
Mr. Chair, I would just say that, and I'm not sure how best to do this, but we just talked at length about the possibility or the need for a special meeting to make this appointment of a community member. So I'm not sure if that requires some formal action here to that schedule or not.
I don't think anything formal is required today. That will be part of staff's research with county council as to determine whether or not that's needed. And if it is, that meeting will be set in accordance with statute and bylaws. Anything further, council?
No.
Okay. So we do contemplate the possibility, as discussed, that we will have a additional meeting set on the calendar sometime in early 2021, for example.
Yeah.
But right now, what we're being informed of is that the calendar as it exists has meetings in both April and October of 2021. And again, we are free, as we have been in the past, to notice and schedule additional meetings if necessary, and we specifically are contemplating that we may do so in early 2021. Any further comments or discussion on the calendar item? Okay. Do we have public comment on the calendar item?
No, there is no public comments.
Okay. Any public comment on non-agenda items today?
And no.
Okay. Anything further before we wrap up?
None for me.
Okay. Any comments from CCP members before we conclude our meeting today? Well, I want to thank everyone once again for coming together on short notice and working through a document on short notice. I want to thank staff and council and the clerk today for the meeting today, which is put together under less than ideal circumstances. And members of the public, we look forward to fulfilling the obligations that we set forth here today and taking those steps to increase public engagement with this process. So with that, I want to thank everyone, and we will conclude today's meeting.